So chapter 1069 just dropped, and it is one of the most important chapters in the last 20 plus years of One Piece. Starting with the cover story, there's not a ton of stuff happening here, but it seems like Lufeld actually is like a contributor to Mads, and it looks like we might find out more about Mads in this cover story coming up. So continuing from last chapter, we have this run-in with CP0 and Luffy, Jinbei, and Chopper. And right away, we see something that I think is really cool, and it has to do with kind of the politics of One Piece. So because Luffy is now a Yonko, they just can't attack him outright because the government has like there'll be repercussions, right? A massive war could break out. This kind of like shows how important the Straw Hat Grand Fleet was, because without that kind of power at Luffy's side, I think the overall power of his crew wouldn't be as threatening to the world government, and they might even consider him kind of a lesser Yonko, and they wouldn't like care to wait to attack him. Of course, we have classic Luffy though, right? He's just, this person gave me food, I'm gonna help them. I don't care about politics. I don't even know what that word means, right? So you can already tell Luffy's just about to attack them. He doesn't care. Now the chapter progresses to Navy HQ, and there's a ton of interesting stuff in this little bit with Navy HQ. So the first thing I noticed is that Akainu says things are getting messier, which would imply that things are already messy. So I take this two ways. One, I think this is probably the most likely way, is he's talking about the overall like world right now, because we have this run-in with like Law and Blackbeard and all this other stuff going on. So he's probably saying the world's getting messier. Or he could be saying that he could be talking about more Egghead in particular, and that Egghead keeps getting messier. And, you know, to kind of back this up a little bit later, we see right here, he says Kizaru is on his way to Egghead. So why was Kizaru on his way to Egghead? That's another question. I think we'll find out maybe even in the next chapter here, at least very soon we'll find out. But it seems like there might be something more important than just like Vegapunk's attempted assassination going on, and we might find out more about that. Jumping a little bit back from the Kizaru part, we have this little bit here where Akainu kind of acknowledges that, like, obviously he knew this, but Vegapunk is a major, like, big deal, and him joining the Straw Hats would be like huge for them. I think this means that kind of the reasons for them trying to kill Vegapunk wasn't just to like because he learned about some of the stuff from the ancient history. I think it's also that they knew he didn't really have an allegiance to the world government. He had an allegiance to their money, their berries, right? He didn't care about them. It wasn't about them. It was that they were funding him, so he helped them because of that. But he knew that Vegapunk could join another pirate crew at some point, and that Vegapunk really care. It would be much better to just kill Vegapunk than to let a pirate crew gain the power of Vegapunk's like insane brain. And then in the last panel of this section, we see Akainu tell Lucci to wait for the Marines to arrive. So if they were planning on attacking Straw Hat, like when the Marines got there, I don't think Akainu would have had a problem with Lucci attacking Luffy. It seems that he wanted to avoid a conflict with Luffy, which the only place I can see like Akainu's plan in this is that they would say, hey, we'll let you, they're, you know, talking to the Straw Hats, we'll let you leave Egghead and you give us Vegapunk. So like Vegapunk in exchange for safe passage. Now, obviously, like Luffy's not going to allow that, but we'll see where I feel like it's going to be weird if Vegapunk makes it off this island, because there's going to be a weird dynamic where Vegapunk is just like a better Frankie in every way, kind of. So what role would Frankie have if Vegapunk actually joined the crew? So I think two things: either Vegapunk's not getting off of Egghead, or he's going to have some other purpose where he leaves the Straw Hats really soon after leaving Egghead. I don't think he's going to stay with them for too long. Now we're back to Egghead, and we see this fight has started, and we see Gear 5 Luffy, which it tells us one thing we didn't know for sure, and that's that Luffy can just kind of pop Gear 5 at will. It doesn't have many like startup activation requirements like Gear 2, 3, or 4, where he has to like blow into his arm or throw his arm out to make steam or whatever, you know, all that type of stuff. He can just do it at will. And we get a tidbit of like Jinbei being Jinbei, or just like pretty much anyone that's not Luffy, like, hey, this is gonna cause a major incident. Like he wants, you can tell Jinbei wants Luffy to think more of like a politician, and that like his actions have consequences for the world at this point. And, you know, we're just never going to see Luffy think that way. And even though Jinbei knows that too, he's always going to try. And then we get this huge panel of Lucci's awakened form. So it's super crazy to see how it looks. He's more like slender. And then he has those clouds around him, which we've seen a lot recently. And we did see with like Snake Man. And I've seen a theory online, and the theory is that the clouds kind of like are you syncing with your devil fruit's ability. So because like in Gear 4 Snake Man, Luffy had reached a point where he was at sync with his devil fruit. The devil fruit wasn't in sync with his body, and that's why he hadn't had like the awakened form yet of Gear 5. And then if you look at like Kaido's devil fruit was in sync with his body of being like the strongest man alive, but it wasn't in sync with his mind where he wanted to die. So that's why Kaido didn't have the clouds. I don't know how I feel about this theory. I almost feel like there is something with the clouds because we've seen them like a lot recently and we keep seeing them more. So maybe there is something going on there, and this is probably the leading theory on that, but who knows. Now we go to like the command room of Egghead and we see Vegapunk running in and he's like, "Is that the White Warrior?" And this is interesting to me because it's like it's this new title we haven't heard before. So now we have like White Warrior Luffy, another insane title, make him sound even more badass than he already is. We have this tidbit here too, I just love, of Frankie's eyes, because this is the first time he's seen Vegapunk in person, and it's his idol. It's the person like he's looked up to for a long time now, right? And so it's so funny seeing his eyes just pop out of his head. We have kind of two things happening at once. We have Vegapunk is starting to explain devil fruits, and then we have the fight between Lucci and Luffy being shown while he's doing so. Now, before we start talking about the devil fruits, I do want to just point out another thing we see here is that Luffy's personality, like we saw this in the fight with Kaido, but Luffy's personality is just kind of like greatly exaggerated in Gear 5, where it's supposed to be silly. In a way, it almost feels like it's taking the seriousness away from the series. But then I think about how this series is supposed to have seriousness mixed into the funny parts, the comedy parts. It's supposed to be one thing. And I think that ties to some of the central themes of One Piece, in that even in the worst of times, there's still like funny things in this world. And, you know, I could tie this directly to the quote from Vegapunk. Either like any way, this is a wondrous world we live in, right? He says that right here. So I thought that was an interesting thing I wanted to cover on like kind of Luffy's personality here. Now we finally have this devil fruit explanation, where devil fruits are a result of people's desires. So like Sun God Nika, the warrior of liberation, is because of people who are like enchained in the world or are slaves or are looked down upon. They always desire for this god, this hero, Nika. And if devil fruits are will, they are desire, you could say the devil fruit has a will of its own and it found Luffy because Luffy was the match for that devil fruit. That everything lined up to go to Luffy because of the desire in the world for this hero. But then Luffy was kind of like half of himself and the devil fruit was his other half, and they met each other in the middle. Kind of. I think the devil fruit had a bit of a longer journey, but they met each other to become their full being, the warrior of liberation, Sun God Nika. And with this devil fruits being like pure will, this pure desire, this result of desire and will, I could see this for sure in the future being tied into the will of D. How does the will of D tie into this central theme in One Piece of inherited will for one, but just will in general, the power of a person's will? We'll see that. And, it kind of makes sense, this devil fruit explanation, and I'm surprised no one thought of this beforehand with how big will is a thing in One Piece. I look forward to seeing, though, more of, like, how the more devil fruit explanations, like, do devil fruits have the will where they find their user, like I was just talking about? We'll see. I really feel like that is what's happening, and it would make sense how a lot of characters in the series kind of like line up with the personality of their devil fruit. So now that I've covered kind of this explanation, I want to talk about some of the funny like devil fruits we have that are a result of people's desires. There's some guy in One Piece that's like, damn, I really wish someone could wear me as a jacket. I just wish I could make myself a jacket and other people could wear me. Or we also have like some guy who's like, dang, don't you just wish we could just fold people like laundry? That's always what I've wanted my entire life. Or, someone else who just walks up to his friend, he's like, don't you wish we could just turn into a whole bunch of balls? Wouldn't that be insane? And there's just these people with these outlandish wishes or desires, and there's all sorts of devil fruits that like are just kind of funny when you think about why people would want that. But for the most part, when you think about devil fruits as a whole, almost every devil fruit makes sense that someone wished for it. Like the barrier, someone wishes they could make like an impenetrable barrier from the world, or like the human fruit that Chopper has. Like all the animals like seeing humans and wishing, and they're like, oh, I wish I could be a human. There, that makes sense right there. There's almost every devil fruit makes sense why someone would want it. And I can't believe this explanation was in front of us the entire time and no one like realized it. So back to the chapter, we see Sentomaru coming in with 3 seraphims behind him, ready to fight. And we get this really interesting explanation of the like authority levels of seraphim and pacifistas, where we have anyone with like a commanding ship, so you could just take it and then you'd have that lower level of authority. It's them, then Sentomaru, then Vegapunk, and then the Gurusei themselves. It's interesting here because it's like Vegapunk knew that at some point the world government was going to like betray him. So he made it so that he could have like a higher level of authority than anyone who would like he would interact with. Because the Gurusei just kind of sit in their palace and don't go anywhere or do anything, right? But he is out and about. Sentomaru especially is out and about, so they can use the pacifistas and seraphim much more than the Navy can, because they always have this like control over them. Now we have Luffy using a new attack, the mole pistol, and you know, I think what I'm realizing here is like he's gonna be very creative with attacks in Gear 5. But I think the attacks are gonna be much more random than Luffy's like out of Gear 5 attacks are, where he's gonna be basically making all his attacks up on the spot, where when he's out of Gear 5, he has like attacks that he will use when he thinks he's right, like Gum Gum Pistol. And then Vegapunk tells Sentomaru to like guide them to the vacuum rocket. And we've seen this mentioned like once or twice now. And we haven't seen this yet. We know what the Frontier Dome is, obviously, but we don't know what this vacuum rocket is. It's going to be an escape device, but it's kind of like, how far is this going to take them? Because they should just take them to the Sunny would be the goal. But for like something that's called a vacuum rocket, it seems like it's just going to send them super far away. And I don't think it makes sense for the crew to get split up from like the 2 people still on the Sunny. And we see Jinbei saying like, don't tell me they cloned us. And this brings an interesting like kind of like idea in that maybe the plan was always for the 7 warlords to clone them and make warriors out of them and then, you know, toss them to the side. And then what I think is interesting is Sentomaru is still trying to get a grasp on what's going on. Like, he hasn't exactly chosen Luffy's side. He's like initially done that because he's going with Vegapunk, who saved his life basically, but he's still trying to figure out like what is going on in this situation. Why am I helping him? Like what is all this stuff that's happening? But he doesn't even get the chance to like fully choose a side, because Lucci does something very smart. He takes down the person who has the authority higher than him so that they can get the Seraphim back under his control. And while it was smart to do that, I think this has just kind of incurred Luffy's wrath more, and Luffy might not be messing around. Like, he might just be like, all right, I'm ending this. You messed with 2 people now, you're done. So that's the chapter, but now I want to talk about some of my thoughts overall about this arc at this point. And I want to say the fights seem very like fast, very shallow, more like Sabati fights than they're not fights like the pinnacle of an arc fight like Kaido versus Luffy. This feels more like a Sabati style arc where the fights are temporary. This arc is moving. It needs to get through this arc fast. There's a lot of stuff to cover. So the fights are going to be quick, and really they're not going to have a result. We're not going to see any clear winners here or clear losers. And like, people might lose or win, but it's going to be a fast thing that doesn't have much impact on those characters. And finally, we have a break next week. So unfortunately, I think this is how it's going to go for the rest of the month here, where it's going to be week on, week off, week on, week off. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be making chapter reviews every chapter now, and I have a lot more anime content, a lot more One Piece content. You're going to love my channel. Thank you for watching. Stay slippery. Butter out. Get high.